Welcome back, viewers at home. Now, the International Criminal Court has finally issued warrants of arrest for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity, including the use of starvation as a weapon and directing attacks against civilians. Now, in May this year, the ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan sought arrest warrants for crimes connected to the 7th October 2023 attacks and Israel's subsequent offensive in Gaza. Now, the Executive Director of the Afro-Middle East Centre, Naeem Jeenah, joins me now to unpack the significance of this development. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Naeem. Jazakallah so much for joining us tonight.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Now, all things considered, it has been about 6 months since the ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan applied for the arrest warrants. Why do you think it took this long and after tens of thousands have been killed in Gaza?
Well, usually this kind of process does take a few months. I think this did take a little longer than normal, but one can expect that it would take 3-4 months before the court makes a decision to issue the arrest warrants. I think that the extra little delay was really linked to the fact that this is, for the court, I think, a hot potato and very politically charged rather than simply a legal matter. But ultimately, the court did the right thing and issued the arrest warrants.
Now, while we celebrate the arrest warrants, many people are not aware of the high personal cost it has come to Karim Khan and other judges who have been harassed and even threatened. What can you share on that point?
Well, I think that the nature of the court, I mean, people such as the prosecutor and the judges would expect that not everyone would like their actions. So I don't think that that's such a big deal. They trying to prosecute some of the worst criminals in the world, and in their attempts to do so, one can expect that those criminals and their supporters will not be happy. And clearly, in the case of the Israelis, you're looking at their supporters being, I mean, Israel itself being a genocidal state, and the supporters being the major superpower in the world, the United States. So a few personal kind of threats is not that big a deal, considering the opposition that they're taking on.
Now, before we gain insight on non-member states, I just want you to kindly explain the legal obligations on member states with regards to these arrest warrants that have been issued.
So now that the warrants have been issued, it means that all states that are signatories to the Rome Statute, so including South Africa, for example, most European states and most states of the world that have signed the Rome Statute, they're now under an obligation to arrest any of the people who are being charged or against whom the warrants have been issued if those charged people were to land on their territory. So if Netanyahu were to visit South Africa, for example, the South African state is under an obligation to arrest him and hand him over to the ICC in The Hague. The same obligation then lies with all other signatory states to the Rome Convention. The EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell already said that EU member states should abide by that, those that are signatories, and almost all of them are. So what this does, in fact, is that while Israel is not a signatory, and the Israeli response has been that this is anti-Semitic and whatnot, the usual kind of hysterical rubbish. What it does, in effect, is that it makes the world a smaller place in terms of where those two men are able to travel to, because they will now be afraid that certain countries, if they were to travel to them, they might get arrested and sent to The Hague. So that, at the very least, is a positive thing. It's a good sign. The world needs to, in various kinds of ways, isolate Israel and isolate Israeli politicians, Israeli military leaders, etc. And this is one step in that direction.
Now, just for the sake of clarity, if Mr. Jeenah is able to share why is Israel, as well as the United States, not signatory? And I think most importantly, do you believe or are you confident that Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant will answer for the crimes committed in Gaza, considering the fact that they are not signatory members?
Well, let me answer the second question first. Irrespective of whether they're signatories, whether Israel is a signatory or not, there's no guarantee that they will face justice. If Israel, let's assume Israel was a signatory, all they have to do is just remain in Israel and not travel to any other signatory state of the Rome Convention, and they would be, in a sense, fine. I mean, Israel would be in violation of the endorsement of the Rome Convention by not arresting them, but that's their state. So there's no guarantee that they will that they really will face justice, and I think that it's important to note that. But the fact that they're not a signatory to the Rome Statute doesn't mean that they're not accountable. And that is because the so-called State of Palestine has acceded to the Rome Statute. And in terms of the Rome Statute, the ICC has jurisdiction over all signatories to the statute, as well as for all crimes committed on the territory of signatories to the statute. So if there was a crime committed in Palestinian territory, irrespective of whether the perpetrator of that crime is a signatory or not, the ICC has jurisdiction over that. Why Israel and the United States are not signatories? Well, the Rome Statute is one of those international treaties or statutes that states are able to choose whether they want to sign on or not. The real reason that these two states don't want to sign on is precisely for what we're seeing now. They don't want their soldiers, they don't want their politicians to be held accountable by an international court. In fact, the United States has threatened the members of the court in the past, the prosecutors as well as the judges of the court, with all kinds of sanctions if they were to even think of prosecuting any American soldier or any American for human rights violations. So it's clear the reason that they don't want to sign the Rome Statute is because they don't want to be subject to the kind of justice that they would have to be if they were signatories, and they want to be able to commit their crimes with complete impunity. And we're seeing that now in Gaza. We've seen it before in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon. We've seen it before in Palestinian territories. We've seen it from the United States in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, and in other places.
I think for now we can all pray and hope that, Allah continues blessing and granting them patience, the people of Palestine, and, us continuing our efforts in assisting the people of Palestine through just sharing awareness or just assisting through the humanitarian cause. Now, South Africa has taken Israel to the ICJ for genocide. How is that case going, and do you expect a ruling soon?
The last month, South Africa submitted its what the court calls the memorial, a huge, massive document detailing why it has accused Israel of genocide, detailing the crimes that Israel has committed in Gaza, and detailing the instances of Israeli intent and Israeli expression of intent to commit genocide. That document has not been made public, that memorial, but from what we understand, it's an extremely detailed document, very damning in terms of Israeli actions. Do we expect a ruling soon? No, we don't. Typically, this kind of a case would take a couple of years for the court to resolve. So we don't expect that the court will reach a ruling that will be able to stop the genocide from continuing or from continuing here. In fact, it's quite possible that the court will only reach a judgment after a ceasefire has been reached, and inshallah very soon. So the effect of a court ruling on this is not in a sense to stop the genocide, but it is to hold accountable those who have committed genocide. So it'll be a long time before the court comes to a decision.
Now, Mr. Jeenah, I believe that even a Hamas leader, Mohammed Deif, was also one of the individuals listed on the list of individuals who arrest warrant was issued for. What does that mean for the Hamas movement?
So you might remember that in May, when the prosecutor Karim Khan drew up the charge sheet and submitted to the court his application for warrants to be issued, it was quite unbalanced. It was two Israelis, Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, and three leaders of Hamas, Mohammed Deif, Yahya Sinwar, and Ismail Haniyeh. Ismail Haniyeh and Yahya Sinwar were subsequently assassinated, and Yahya Sinwar more recently martyred in Gaza. Mohammed Deif, the Israelis claim, has been martyred. There's no confirmation of his martyrdom, and the court is saying that it's not sure whether he's dead or alive, and therefore it has issued the warrant. Assuming he's alive, frankly, it doesn't make too much of difference to Hamas, and it doesn't make too much of difference to him. I don't think Mohammed Deif, if he's alive, has any plans of traveling anywhere, so he's not going to get arrested. But if he is martyred, then of course it makes even less difference. But what is important to note here is that from the very beginning, even before May, before the application to the court by Karim Khan, Hamas has always stressed that it would welcome any independent inquiry into what took place on the 7th of October and what took place since the 7th of October with Israel's genocide. That any independent inquiry would be welcomed, and if any of its members were guilty of war crimes or any crimes, that it would hand them over to any legitimate court. That has been Hamas's position, that they have not changed. They do believe that they conducted the operation on the 7th of October with a great sense of ethics in terms of war, etc. And if that was violated, then those who violated it must be held to account. Of course, Israel, as you know, has accused Hamas and the Palestinian resistance from Gaza of all kinds of, nonsensical accusations, such as rape and beheading babies and all of that. No proof for any of those. Israel has also accused the Gaza resistance of murdering civilians on the 7th of October. Now we know for a fact that many of those civilians were actually killed by Israeli tanks, by Israeli helicopter fire, etc. And that is why Israel refuses to entertain any idea of an independent commission that would investigate what took place, because any independent commission would find Israeli culpability in the murder of those civilians, those Israeli civilians. Hamas, as I said, maintains that it would welcome any independent inquiry, and it will subject itself to the results of any such inquiry.
With the goalpost always changing with Israel, we are yet to expect what's the next move that they'll throw out to the world or just to the court itself. Now, Mr. Jeenah, before we close off our conversation, what would be your message to, Palestinian activists or pro-Palestinian individuals out there regarding how we can make sure that Gaza's genocide remains the world's foremost issue today, as well as any closing remarks regarding our conversation tonight?
Well, I think that the world has, over the past year, has really taken on the issue of the genocide very strongly. I'd be surprised if you could go anywhere in the world and find that people have not heard about the genocide taking place in Gaza. The actions, of course, need to be stepped up. People need to be held to account, and justice must be sought. And in the cases of these two, in terms of the ICC warrants, that citizens of all states that are signatories must ensure that their governments make sure that these two, Gallant and Netanyahu, will not be able to visit those states. And in fact, further forms of isolation and sanction will be issued against them. Apart from that, you know, the campaign for a ceasefire needs to be stepped up. The genocide is worsening in Gaza now. Northern Gaza has become killing fields, even worse than the rest of Gaza, with no media there. Media have been targeted and journalists assassinated, doctors have been assassinated, etc. Aid trucks have been burnt. And all of these, in terms of the humanitarian situation as well, needs to continue to be part of the global campaign, so that Palestinians might regain some sense of trust in the rest of humanity, in the humanity of the rest of humanity. Because right now, I think being a Palestinian means that you have very little trust for any other human being.
Mr. Jeenah, Jazakallah so much for joining us tonight and just giving us insight and much clarity on, you know, the meaning of many decisions like the ICC issuing warrants of arrest and what it means to, you know, non-members and members at that. Jazakallah so much for joining us tonight.
Assalamu alaikum.
Viewers at home, that was Naeem Jeenah sharing insight with regards to the significant development by the International Criminal Court that has issued warrants of arrest for the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. But that's where we close it off for now. Let's head over to an ad break. We'll see you just shortly.